In Colombia, we're trying to get faith leaders and women leaders, not necessarily women faith leaders, but women leaders and faith leaders to articulate a shared value set for a Colombia with collective aspirations for the future that are not based in the violence of the past. Colombia has about 100 years of constant armed conflicts, if not more. If you ask the indigenous, they say it goes back to the establishment of the state, or even the arrival of the Spanish. So there are very few people there who know what peace looks like. And so we're leaning on women leaders who tend not only to be community leaders where the men have been killed, displaced, or entered the armed groups, they're household leaders, and then there's a whole raft of things that you and I both know that women bring to a conflict space that men don't bring to that space, in a positive sense. The ability to kind of have discussions and lead discussions in the household that male leaders oftentimes in front of these identity groups can't have in the public space. They have to take a harder line because they have to represent their group. But in the household, women as advocates for transformation can be very effective in front of their husbands and their sons so that they don't enter some of these armed conflicts. That's one. The other is really just, people talk about women as nurturing, and I think that's, again, an abstraction. But the way it plays out in reality, particularly in a place like Colombia, is women oftentimes have the financial responsibility, which also has kind of a nurturing responsibility in the sense of what do we do with the money in terms of education, in terms of advancing the futures of my children. That's a thought process that women tend to be engaged in much more than the men. I mean, it's been shown statistically that if you want real economic advancement, but more importantly, good management of finances, give the money to the women, right? Because the guys tend to have different imperatives and priorities, and are not as careful with the resources. So there's that piece as well as kind of almost a management attitude, right? I'll take it away from the platitude of nurturing and put it into this idea of kind of effective management. So these women leaders that we're working with, all of whom are victims of violence, particularly mostly armed violence, so they've had their husbands killed, their sons killed, disappeared, they have no idea what happened to them, they themselves have been affected by violence in the conflict space. They are trying to think through how can that reality simultaneously exist with the idea that I can become a reconciler between perceived or real adversaries so that we can change the way we all think about who we are in Colombia. Despite our differences, we can find a shared aspiration as Colombians. And I think women are particularly well suited to articulate that, as well as faith leaders, because they have the authority and legitimacy and doctrinal capacity to go and mobilize other communities, larger communities.